Digital business, digital enterprise, digital transformation, very important topics today, and topics that we talk about a lot on CXOTalk. And on episode number 131 of CXOTalk, we're talking with a genuine pioneer in creating a digital business. My guest, Robert Keane, is the CEO of Cimpress, which most people know as Vistaprint. That's their most well-known brand. And we're going to be talking about digital business today. Robert, how are you?
Very well, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much. So digital business and mass customization. I guess mass customization is actually the right term to use, isn't it?
We certainly see ourselves as the world leader in mass customization, which is where we focus as a business, yes.
So, Robert, tell us about Vistaprint and Cimpress and briefly your professional background.
Okay, well, let me start with my professional background. Most of my career, I've been founder and CEO of this company, of Cimpress. And what we are is, again, the world leader in mass customization. People aren't typically familiar with that term. So the way we describe it is the ability to produce with the reliability, the quality, and the affordability of mass production, small individual orders where each and every one embodies a personal relevance that's very inherent to a customized physical product. And certainly 2 decades ago, and even today, it's relatively difficult to have something that's personally customized and at the same time affordable and available in very, very small quantities. That's where we as a business focus. We use technology throughout our business in every aspect of the value chain to do that and to break the trade-off between what traditionally was a requirement to either procure in very high volumes at a low unit cost or to pay a very high unit cost if you wanted a small quantity.
So you had the idea for Vistaprint when you were actually an MBA student.
Yes, actually, it was not Vistaprint at the time. We were a company by the name of Bonne Impression. I went to business school in France, and I founded the company in Paris in 1995. And we grew focused on helping small businesses do graphic design from their desktop. This is in the 94, 95 time period. This is the internet existed, but I wasn't really very well aware of it. It was using PCs, 286 style computers with desktop publishing and laser printing, which was a new technology at the time. But helping people produce, once again, very small quantities of customized product at the time, things like multi-panel flyers from their desktop. And in 1998 and 99, we moved over to the internet. And at that time, we changed our brand name to Vistaprint, and we came into the US market in 2000.
And so Cimpress is now your upper level brand, and Vistaprint is one part of Cimpress. So tell us about Cimpress, the company's size. Give us some context.
Yeah, so for listeners or viewers in the US, Cimpress is very much known first and foremost by the Vistaprint brand. In fact, we have 8 or 10 different brands in Europe. More than half our revenues are with other brands, and about 55% of our revenues are outside of the US. So as a company, our last fiscal year, we did about just over $1.5 billion US dollars in revenue. We have about 6,000 employees in 20 countries around the world. And we're a very unique combination of both company culture, but also company capabilities or competencies that mix broadly 3 capabilities together. Software development, manufacturing and high volume production systems, and very importantly, e-commerce and direct marketing.
And who is your target market?
So depending on the brand, we have different target markets. So at the Cimpress wide company level, our revenues are slightly more than half our revenues, maybe 60%, come from small businesses with less than 10 employees. But we also have significant revenues for personal applications, what we call home and family applications, everything from personalized calendars to holiday cards or other types of customized products, and then mid and larger size corporate applications as well. So our customers are companies or people individually who want low volume customized physical products.
Now, how did you identify, so when you came up with the idea, how did you identify this particular niche, this particular need?
Well, going back to my professional experience prior to going to business school, I was in a company for about 7 years that was in a variety of OEM, original equipment manufacturing, engineering and design, and keyboards and displays. And we got into kiosks, which is back in the late 80s. The idea of kiosk and ATM as an example of a kiosk was really still new at the time. And it was a .com before its time. We were losing a lot of money and we couldn't get funding with it, but it was really trying to use a network to, and a modem-based network to address e-commerce, what today is called e-commerce. That is the ability to enable commerce remotely across a screen and across a network. And it was really, again, economically a failure. But one of the most interesting applications we tried there was to do things like baby announcements and party invitations where the customized products would be designed on screen, and once a day the modem would send those up to a centralized digital production facility. And it really struck me at the time how strange it was. There was this huge dichotomy between high volume production, and specifically print. If you think of a Tylenol box and you lay it out flat, it's about the size of, say, a baby announcement, but it costs 100 times less per square inch than that baby announcement. And so I was fascinated by this, what I at the time called an arbitrage opportunity of producing in huge volumes, the Tylenol box model, at pennies per square inch, but the cost in micro quantities that was 100 times that. And this idea that somehow digital technology and what we call DIY, do-it-yourself self-service, where the customer is doing this design and the work for themselves rather than coming face-to-face for a sales approach, could somehow transform that. And so I left that company in 94. In 95, I had the good fortune of, when I was at business school, one of my classmates I became friends with had left Microsoft, and she was very familiar with the Publisher, desktop publishing software from Microsoft. I started working for that team as a consultant out of their Paris, European headquarters are based in Paris. And those combination of experiences before going to business school and working with Microsoft Publisher really reinforced this idea that there was a huge gaping need of low volume customized print, and we over time expanded that into many other areas, signage or customized apparel or the like.
Okay, so, but clearly there's a significant gap between recognizing this opportunity and having the platform, the technology that's needed in order to execute that. So, and I would think that gap would be a very large gap in this case. So how did you bridge? How did you take this idea into reality?
Well, I often say it was a dimmer switch that was faulty. It wasn't a light bulb switch that I just flipped on one day and said we had the idea. So over a 5-6 year period between 95 and 2001, we were trying many different models, sometimes getting to break even, sometimes falling back into significant losses, funded first by venture capital in 97 through the .com crash. And that was our corporate background, but from a customer value proposition and a digital delivery model, we were testing many different things, some of them working, some of them not. And so, again, it was a multi-year flirtation with bankruptcy, and eventually we started realizing that it was a combination of delivering a desktop publishing software which was used in the browser, and at the time in the late 90s, writing a software application to run in the browser was still very new, and really using what we call computer integrated manufacturing, which is harnessing the power of software and information technology networks to automate the flow of information that allows individual processes to exchange information with each other, to schedule activities, to initiate actions, and to control every part of the manufacturing process. It was this combination of the back-end software management of the production with the front-end delivery of a desktop publishing through the internet browser that finally clicked. And between not when we launched that in the 99, August, September 99, through, it was 0 revenues. By 2003, we hit 35 million revenues. And by 2010, we hit over 670 million revenues annually, all organically. And again, last year we did 1.5. So it was, I wish I could say it was some brilliant idea. It was really the school of hard knocks and business models around this core customer need we recognized, which was being unfulfilled.
Okay, so your business model is all about mass customization. Tell us about mass customization.
Okay, so again, I mentioned before, it's really producing with the reliability and quality and affordability of mass production. We all can buy mass-produced products, which are great quality, which just don't cost a lot. And yet, if you wanted to get anything from a custom card to a custom suit to a custom sign to anything else which is individually designed and produced, the unit cost goes through the roof. And what's happening is, the reason for that is not that your local printer or your local sign shop or embroidery company is making a fortune. There's a huge amount of setup costs which are associated with customized products. So what you need to do is, one, set up the physical production machine, each job, in a traditional model. And secondly, even more importantly, you've got to get an enormous amount of information from the mind of the customer, and sometimes it's not even well-organized information, to the point of production and then through to the delivery. And so we think of that also as a per order setup cost. And we use digitization and, importantly, standardization of many processes to break those setup costs and make, in economic terms, we take them from being significant per unit costs and a significant marginal cost to basically being de minimis marginal costs. So we take and delete the setup costs. When that happens, you can sell very, very small quantities very cost effectively. So going back to your question, mass customization is all about the intersection of 3 different areas. One is where we are very passionate about empowering our customers to make an impression, do something that's personally relevant and important to them or to their customer. Secondly, integrating computer integrated manufacturing, every step of the process controlled through software. And 3, what really drives our economic engine, how we make money, which is to do huge scale, but do it in very, very small quantities. So last year, we did about 40 million individual orders, and inside every box that went to any given customer, there are 2 or 3 customized types of products. Maybe someone ordered a custom embroidered polo shirt, a lawn sign, and 250 business cards, and that would all go in the same box. So that means last year we had something like 80 million, a little bit more than that, custom setups done, well over 1 million per week. And none of that exists in inventory. It's created or uploaded by our customers across an e-commerce site or one of our multiple e-commerce sites and produced to order in micro quantities. And that is mass customization. Now, customization exists throughout the world, and we're not the first printer in the world and won't be the last. I'd say the defining characteristic of mass customization are those 3 intersections I talked about, but importantly, doing it at huge scale through digital enablement that breaks the cost of setups, and in doing so, opens up huge new markets.
So what you are doing is based on various platforms.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I had a little bit of a network issue. I said various, I heard it was based on various stages of, and I didn't get the full question, I'm sorry.
Custom platforms.
Custom platforms.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, and so we've built a custom platform, and what we, as a company, we grew most quickly, and from the 2000 to 2010 stage with the Vistaprint brand. It was incredibly successful, still today is a successful and growing brand, well over $1 billion in revenue. But we realized, and we actually looked to Amazon as an example of this. Amazon 10, 12 years ago realized they had locked into their e-commerce system an incredible infrastructure system, which today is known as Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And they were able to separate out the back end from the front end and expose the capabilities of the back end as a platform. So the Cimpress strategy is obviously in a very different world than the Amazon strategy, but was inspired by that and other platform strategies where we are exposing a common technological and operational back end, which is used by multiple merchants for multiple end applications. Because in our business, like in many other businesses, scale drives competitive advantage. But there are many, many different applications and brands that need to be addressed through different types of customer needs. Traditionally, outside of digital businesses, this is actually a very well-established strategic approach to business. Think of the Volkswagen Group. They sell Audi, Volkswagen, Porsche, Seat, Skoda. They have many different brands, but they produce everything on the same production facilities and the same supply chain. What we've been able to do is, because of the arrival of the internet and because we spend a huge amount of money on technology development, we're able to take that type of common platform and apply it to customized, individually unique products. And it's, again, it is very much a platform play. And that's one reason why we have expanded the number of brands which we have, either organically or increasingly through acquisition.
Now we have.
Yeah, and I really apologize. I am not hearing you right now.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we have an
Well, we
echo,
have an echo.
and I'm going to.
I'm going to mute.
I was going to say I'm
I
going
was
to
going to say I'm going to mute you
while I'm talking.
while I'm talking,
but then you can't hear.
but then you can't hear the question.
Or actually,
Or
I
actually, I muted me.
I've done this
I've done this
131
131
episodes
episodes
now,
now.
and I'm hoping eventually I'll get it right.
I'll get it right.
Okay. Well, no problem.
All right. So we have
a question from Arsalan Khan.
And he asks, what kind of processes did you rethink, and how did you measure their importance or lack of importance?
So, one, I wish I could say that we just stepped back and figured this all out in an offsite over the course of a week. But we did a lot of this rethinking over the course of multiple years, and especially in the 97 to 2001 timeframe. And then we did a whole nother major rethink about 3 years ago. So I'll start with the original idea. We really did have in mind two things: the customer need, and really understanding that what were the unfulfilled customer needs. And it was, in our case, quite evident that the small quantities of customized products were very, very well regarded and sought after. They were just very expensive. So we wanted to stick in that unmet need because of the second area, which was the enormous difference in cost of production between high volume and low volume. And so when we started saying, what can we do to totally change the, we didn't use these MBA speak terms, but if I think back to that and say, what was the paradigm we were changing? We were saying, what were the ways of thinking about a business and about doing these customized products, which were gospel in the industry, but that didn't need to be the case. And there were many, many things. So we had a very good relationship with Microsoft for years, but we were paying 60, 70 US dollar equivalent for every CD-ROM of Microsoft Publisher, which we would sell at a 20% margin to our customers. And again, in 1999, we started saying, 1998, what if we could do that?
And did we get you back, Robert?
We went to the CXO ball, and I'm back. So
okay, fantastic. So you were saying, so you then decided, okay, how can we do this over the internet?
Yes, and once again, it was all around the idea of we focused on what was important was breaking down the marginal cost, because we understood there was this difference between high volume production and low volume production. And we wanted to use we were very convinced, maybe rightfully or wrongly, that technology was the answer there. And so every time we could identify something as a marginal setup cost, we would attack that and try to think about how could we use digital technology to break that down. So rather than paying $80 every time we shipped a CD that Microsoft had developed, we said, what if we can develop our own software which will spread across the internet and give away for free? We're talking on the Google Hangouts chat, which we were, would have cost millions of dollars in specialized technology 10 years ago, and today it's a free technology. So there was one area that we said, let's redefine how desktop publishing is done, and especially for small businesses. Secondly, we looked at how production was done, and digital printing was already coming into the world, and actually people this digital printing refers to not using physical printing plates, but rather having, like you think of your laser or inkjet printer, something which is digitally printed. And there, we actually went the reverse, and we went to traditional large-scale printers that were the large German production presses, and we said, how can we apply digital technology to reduce the setups there? And that became an aggregation play. We would aggregate together 150 business card orders onto one large plate, and we would split the setup costs by those 150 different business cards. So, but then to do that aggregation of 150 business card orders, which we would produce maybe 1,000 cards deep, that we'd be producing 150,000 business cards. That broke the setup costs because but it required enormous amounts of investment in software technology to aggregate the graphic design of 150 different orders automatically, and to do that over and over again. So going back to the question, every time, those two examples are two of many, but we always were looking to, we were fascinated by the low marginal cost of a digital business model. There's high fixed costs. We as a company spend about $150 million a year on technology development. That's a huge amount, but when you divide it out by 40 million orders, it comes to a few dollars per order.
Okay, so you developed software that enabled users to essentially do self-service, to create various types of printed items. And so that means that you must have invested a very significant amount in the user experience, because at any step along the way, if you have to stop and offer customer support, that's very expensive. And it seems to me it would break your business model.
Absolutely. So, and it would. And interestingly, today, we work with customers who use desktop publishing programs from Adobe and others and upload to us under brands other than Vistaprint. But one of the keys to the Vistaprint success was very much, if you're familiar with Clayton Christensen's models, we very much went to the bottom of the barrel of customers in terms of the customers no one else wanted to serve. I often said that we were serving, and we still today, very proudly serve the needs of the dog walkers, the tennis instructors, and the independent plumbers. And we understood that for those customers, their alternative was bad clip art, printed on a yellow sheet of paper, folded twice, which became their 3-panel flyer. And for these micro businesses, they were already doing desktop publishing, and they were doing it in a DIY self-service mode. So we said, this goes back to the question of what were we trying to change, and we really saw the enormous opportunity if we could serve customers who did the graphic design for us, rather than us, like in a traditional printer or graphic designer, having to do it for them. We actually took away hundreds and hundreds of dollars of setup costs per order. And very interestingly, the name Vistaprint came from the idea that you could see, you have a vista of what you're going to print on the screen. The customers that were doing DIY actually really loved the fact that they had a what you see is what you get rendition of their printing that showed up in their browser. So we actually, by focusing on the most underserved segment of the market, these micro businesses, we converted it to a no marginal cost to us, a self-service model, and we actually got the customers happier because their alternative was using the clip art and Microsoft Word or Microsoft Publisher, which were more complex. Now, over time, today we have several thousand people in customer service operations, but they're located, we have those people located in places like Tunisia and Jamaica and India, where we have high volume customer service operations, which are still, we're relying on the customer to do the vast majority of the work, and we're just helping them out when they need it. And I think that's another example that you see outside of the Cimpress story in many other industries. So when I grew up, when I was young, I wasn't looking for a mortgage, but I imagine if I had gone in to get a mortgage in the 70s, I would have sat down in front of a local banker who would have spent time talking to me, filled out a mortgage application. They would have made their local decision. And today, you go online, it's approved, or certainly car loans are approved through a highly automated, digitally enabled process with high volume service centers located somewhere around the world with automatic, digitally enabled credit score lookups. And there's an enormous amount of processes which have gone from that traditional expensive face-to-face service to still a very responsive service model, but once again reduced the individual cost of processing that order, be it the car loan or the lawn sign.
So Robert, then, are you to categorize your business? Are you then a printing company that relies on technology, or are you a mass customization platform development company and printing happens to be your thing, your expression or instance of it?
Very much the latter. We are a mass customization company which found the first application of that in printing. So printing is a wonderful market for mass customization. Not all printing. You know, I'm drinking from a bottle of water here. Mass customization is not good for producing a label on this bottle of water because the bottled water company produces tens of millions of these a year. But printing is inherently customized, and it serves no purpose for a small business to give a brochure that is produced by the millions and used by thousands of other businesses because they need something that represents them. Likewise, if you are doing a baby announcement, if it has someone else's or a generic picture of someone else's baby on it, it's not very helpful. So there is when we talk about being passionate about empowering people to make an impression, this individually meaningful physical products creates great customer value in customization. So when you combine economically, we do large scale, small quantities, and we do mass customization. But customization for customization's sake, in the absence of a clear customer need, wouldn't generate any revenues or any material revenues. So we see ourselves as a mass customization company first. Now a lot of these are very close corollaries to printing, but we have a very rapidly growing business in things like embroidered clothing for, once again, very small quantities. So you would like to have your company logo or your CXOTalk logo on a polo shirt or a parka that you wear. We do that. We do customized phone covers for iPhones. We do for personal applications. We do signage. So there are other products which we're getting into, which are all, again, close corollaries of print. But over time, we see many, many other applications. Packaging, again, that's a printed product, but it's very expensive to get packaging unless you're buying tens of thousands of folding boxes per year. But if you're a small eBay reseller and you sell 2 things a week, wouldn't it still be wonderful to have 50 boxes or 100 boxes a year that have your logo and your brand on that? But you can't buy 100 custom boxes today. We are changing that. We've got, through 2 of our European brands, we've introduced customized low volume packaging that starts at a quantity of 10. So each time, again, we're looking to markets to say, where is this intersection of customer need and disruptive cost difference between high volume and low volume? And I guess a third attribute is, where can digital technology in our business model break that constraint and fulfill the customer need?
Okay, so you're investing quite a substantial sum right now in building this platform, and it sounds like as you build the mass customization platform, you're thinking in generalized terms so that you can branch out the business in different directions.
That's correct. And the way I describe this is that 15 years ago, we understood for the first time that we could take across the internet thousands and eventually millions of individual orders, and through these processes, aggregate them, standardize them, and produce them and have these lower costs and higher qualities we've been talking about. But we did that at the time 100% through a single vertically integrated brand and operational experience. So the Vistaprint brand, we used to say we want to automate and standardize every step of the value chain from design conception through product delivery. And so that's why we had our desktop publishing program in the browser. We had templates and the like. Today, we realize that this is the Amazon analogy we referred to before, that there's just an enormous opportunity to break out that core competency of mass customization and apply it elsewhere. And so we are looking to do that. And we also, when we look at innovation at our size, we're getting to a point where, for me, I spend a lot of time worrying about how can we stay small as we get big? How can we stay entrepreneurial in our culture? And the best way to do that is to keep chopping up our business into smaller squads and teams which are empowered to make their own decisions. And this gets a little bit into some technical details, but by using services, by software services and microservices, we are able to use APIs, application programming interfaces, which allow the different parts of our company to talk to each other without having to actually plan together. And planning always looks good on paper, but letting dozens or hundreds of teams individually just pursue their best vision of how to serve a customer need within the confines of our overall strategy is much more effective. And by moving to a platform approach, we are much more able to do that type of breaking up of what previously was this monolithic organization that had gotten to 3,000 or 4,000 people, vertically integrated and tightly coupled, and decoupling, and that has a lot of advantages to innovation.
This is really interesting. So you are using the technology to help drive cross-departmental, cross-boundary communication inside various departments or among and between various departments inside the company. You're using the technology as kind of a model to help drive that, if I understand what you're saying correctly.
Yes, especially as you get into the technology. So for a decade, as we got bigger and bigger, we're building a monolithic ball of twine in our software code, and everything was connected to everything else. But when you get to hundreds, and then we have 500 software engineers, to actually understand that if you change one piece of the code, something else, what is that going to do to every other part of the code? is incredibly difficult to do. And about 10, 15 years ago, as software was getting more and more significant in size, people started realizing in the academic world and then in some of the early leaders like Amazon that breaking this up into individual services which communicate through a standardized language, software language, and set of protocols, but other than that, are left totally to their own devices to figure out, if they want to use Ruby on Rails or a Microsoft environment or any other thing, or they want to do X and another team wants to do Y. Don't try to dictate from a center how to solve the customer need or tackle the technology challenge. Simply dictate the need for autonomous work units or services which can communicate together in a known way. It is much, much more nimble and fast, and we are not there yet. We are certainly very committed. We've been a year and a half into this effort to break up, maybe 2 years, but we already see the more we can break ourselves up into these independent units, the more quickly we can move. And it's almost counterintuitive because the larger company is, the more you like to think that, sitting in the center, you can figure out all the optimization you need to do across a large group of people. But it's actually the overhead costs of doing that optimization kill innovation.
Now, what is the impact on the collaboration among the people inside the company? How are you thinking about driving that aspect of it, the organizational aspect?
People are really excited about this. We talk about returning to our entrepreneurial heritage and or resurrecting our entrepreneurial heritage. And there's a real people who have been here 10, 15 years say, oh, the old company's back. Because people do this naturally in startup companies. You're 2 or 10 or 40 people working in very close quarters. And you all understand that you're on the same team, but you also understand that you have to play different positions. And someone who works here often uses the story of watching kids play soccer, and they'll all run over to where the ball is. Everyone on the team, and then the ball gets kicked to the other side, and they all run over there. You watch a professional, World Cup match, and everyone knows their position, and they stay in their position. They work together. So this has allowed people to really play their position, but also to know they're on the same team, and people really like that we're getting back to the old speed and innovative culture that we had when we were smaller.
And so how much effort do you as CEO invest in thinking about this and helping make sure that this happens in the way that you want?
A lot. I mean, I think culture is really important, and larger companies very quickly can succumb to a large corporate culture. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about how to constantly stay small as we get big. But also, I certainly think the key to being successful is to just simply hire and align great people around a common vision, and then constantly fight to preserve this culture.
So tell us now about the platform and tell us what's next. Where are you taking this business, and how do you manage the risk associated with moving from printing, keeping a common new platform, into other areas?
Well, this is a big job, but we are not, jumping from trying to do even 3D printing on our traditional printing. We're staying. Well, we first of all recognize that we have multiple brands that are using, especially in Europe, where we are implementing this first. We have multiple brands and different geographic focuses in different countries around the continent that are selling under very different value propositions, but in the end are still selling the same products. So flyers, business cards, embroidered clothing, signage. So what we are doing is, just as in the past, we or some of the companies we've acquired pulled off the mass customization trick of aggregating individual orders within this vertically integrated system, we are now focusing on simply aggregating, what I might call a meta aggregation, aggregating from 3 or 4 different brands into the same supply chain network. And so it is not a easy technological feat, but it is certainly no more difficult than what we've done for the last decade, aggregating together millions of individual orders. So we are trying to focus on early deliverables. We talk a lot about getting out minimal viable products or minimally viable products. We've actually changed that term to call, more and more to talk about minimally lovable products, because something that's viable and the customer doesn't love is not quite the right thing. But we are taking this in chunks, in small pieces, and we're not trying to boil the ocean. We see this as a multi-year effort, and we already are starting to, we announced this strategy about a year ago. There was a lot of early work in disentangling the monolithic code structure that linked the front end to the back end, and not just for the Vistaprint brand, but for each of our other brands. That, once it gets disentangled and we create an isolation layer, technologically speaking, between the front and the back end, we're able to route orders between those, and that's already happening. It's happening at a smaller scale than we need to be a year from now, and a smaller scale certainly than we will be in 2 years, but we're already starting to see benefits from it.
So obviously, you at heart are a, and correct me if I'm wrong, a business model and a technology company.
That's correct, yeah. I'd say that's true.
And what, no, please go ahead.
And I think these may be the same things, but inherently an entrepreneurial company. So I think great entrepreneurial companies always reinvent what they do. And you don't need to use technology to reinvent how things are done, but you certainly need to reinvent using business model reinvention. And in today's world, where technology is so powerful and so constantly evolving, I think if you can integrate, even if you're in the printing business or you name the other business, you can be in the taxi business, but it sure helps if Uber uses technology to revolutionize that. And so we very much do see ourselves as in that type of business, but importantly, business models and technologies are in service of entrepreneurial reinvention.
And, you know, we're just about out of time. And so I will ask you advice for others who are looking to build a digital business or who are in established companies looking to undertake a digital transformation. What advice do you have as somebody who's been doing this since your company was founded, essentially?
You know, it is, frankly, this may not be the answer people want to hear, but I think it is very hard to do in an established business. I was in a very well-run and profitable business back in '95, but it was not a digital business. And it was just very hard to do. And when I started the company, we started and we were born digital. Every single thing we did was based on the assumption that technology could transform some aspect of our value chain. And I'm sure there are good examples of companies that have done this. I'm not that aware of them. The advice I would say is, if you are in a larger business, make sure you segregate and protect and allow the digital business you're trying to create, or the entrepreneurial business that you're trying to create, to rewrite rules without being told it can't be done. Because the very essence of entrepreneurial value creation is doing what people say can't be done. And it fails many times. I mean, like I said, we were on the verge of bankruptcy for 5 years, despite a regular infusion of venture capital money. And it's not an easy thing to do. So once you get there, it's just in the DNA of the company. And I'm not sure I have a crisp answer how to take a non-digital business and make it digital.
Okay, then I have to ask one follow-up based on something you just said. So you said you were in bankruptcy for almost in bankruptcy for 5 years before it took off. What made it take off? What was the thing that kicked you over the edge, the tipping point, so to speak?
What's funny, and we were technology driven all the way through this, but it was the dot-com crash. And as funny as that sounds, in 2000, we'd been funded by French venture capitalists. We had expanded the US market, had the inopportune choice of expanding in 2000, right before the dot-com crash came. We could not raise a penny more. And we were stranded halfway between the US market and the European market. And we were about to go bankrupt. And we always were about to go bankrupt. We always had venture company money coming in, venture financing. And the fact that we just could not raise another penny, we had no choice but I couldn't sleep going into the holidays of the end of 2000. And we did radical surgery. We said, we have got to survive based on our own cash flow. We had a business at the time was growing 100% a month over month, but we were going to go out of business. So we went from 80 or 90 people down to 25 people, of which I think 24 had software engineering degrees or something like that. It was just, and we said, we're going to put all our eggs in this basket. It's the last throw we have. And we stretched out all our payment terms with our suppliers. And by May of 2001, we were cash flow positive. And I had friends who were in the dot-com world at that time who were still living off of their 99 and 2000 funding rounds or 97 rounds. And I think what forced us to succeed wasn't some brilliant technological innovation, but the fact that if we didn't make a business model work, we would go bankrupt and we couldn't get any more outside funding. And that totally changed things. We became much more frugal and things that really mattered. Then that business that had been growing 100% a month was all that was left. And again, in the next 2 years, we reached $35 million in revenue.
What an incredible story. We have, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, thank you for having me.
We have been talking with Robert Keane, who is the CEO and founder of Cimpress and Vistaprint, which is the brand that many people here in the US probably will recognize. And we've been talking about mass customization and what it's like to be a truly digital business. This has been episode number 131 of CXOTalk. And everybody, thank you very much for joining us, and we will be back next week. And Robert Keane, thank you for taking the time today.
You're welcome.